I'm Neil Doherty with North Country Whitetails, and welcome to DSI. You know, for years you've been reading about big bucks and some of the stories behind how they're harvested, but you never really got a full picture. In DSI, we're going to break it down in great detail and really give you the behind-the-scenes talk and understanding why deer do what they do. We're going to merge the deer stories with the science behind how the deer move, the food sources in the area, get up above and study aerial photography and really teach you how to use those techniques when it comes to your hunts this fall. This is the story of the Allen buck. This property is a 2,600 acre piece of property surrounded by state woods public hunting. This is a very unique project tucked up in the big woods, and by big woods I mean there is nothing even close within 20 or 30 miles. There's no ag, there's no openings. This is the only food in town, and it's proven quite effectively over the last 4 years to hold the deer and allow the landowner to grow them for an older age class. He's typically targeting 4-year-old or older deer on this particular farm. As far as foods go, there's been food plots pushed in the timber in about 15 locations scattered throughout the property. These food plots in some cases are up to 4 acres in size or as small as 1/4 of an acre, as we have small little hunting food plots designed for bow hunting. The food plots have been planted in a Whitetail Institute mix called No Plow, which is a mixture of clover, brassica, and ryegrass that does extremely well on these poor sandy soils. Now this year was a very unique year. It was 2011 when this buck was hunted, and for the overall area it was about 10 to 15 degrees above the normal temperature for the area. This site has proven to be a weather-driven site. When the weather is poor, the deer flock to these food plots and there's good hunting. When the weather is warm, like it was in 2011, the deer can stay off on some of the natural foods. They don't need to go to the food plots, and the hunting can be very tough. The whole northeastern portion of this farm was cut very heavily about 12 years ago. So there's actually about 1,000 acres of old abandoned clear cuts scattered throughout the property where there's lots of brambles and briars and tremendous browse that not only serves as bedding cover, but it's lots of food per acre, and it's actually pretty good stuff for this part of the world. The deer spend a lot of time eating young regenerating trees and briars. Now another thing that was a lot different this year than it had been in past years is the overall area had a beechnut mast source and a beechnut crop that was better than it had been in the last 7 to 10 years. So the deer had, in the big woods surrounding the property, a tremendous amount of food that actually trumped the quality of the food plots, and the deer started to leave the property and drifted off into the big woods and made the hunting very difficult. Combine that with the warm temperatures, and it was a fall-long hunt before hunters could be successful. The Allen buck was identified on the property with deer cameras. He was photographed on the northeastern portion of the property as well as in the southern portion of the property, walking in and out of the food plots as he checked for does. The Allen buck was actually very active. He'd be in one food plot on one side of the farm and skip all the way across nearly a mile to the other side of the farm and be photographed just 4 or 5 hours later. So when he was on the farm and he was moving, he was extremely visible. The difficulty was the buck numbers are extremely low in this part of the world. So as the people were hunting this property, and there's 4 gentlemen that like to hunt this property, as they're hunting the property, they're hunting a deer density of 12 to 15 deer per square mile. That means without cold weather that concentrates the deer around the food sources, they can hunt on an edge of a food plot for 2 or 3 days without seeing a deer before finally a deer is going to move through, and the chances of that deer being a mature deer are slim. So there's a lot of time in the tree stand with few shooting opportunities. There was actually a kind of a funny encounter with the Allen buck where the landowner that owned the property, who was there hunting for several days, came into the food plot and he missed the Allen buck by about 25 minutes. He came for a mid-morning sit down in this food plot, and as we checked the cameras afterwards, we saw the Allen buck had passed right through where the landowner had walked just about 25 minutes before. So during the course of the rut, it was just difficult to be at the right place at the right time. Now the group of 4 guys that like to hunt this property typically get together on weekends and hunt, and they saw that finally the weather was going to correct itself in the middle of November, There were some cold temperatures, actually a little bit colder weather than is typically forecasted for that area coming, and it was going to be kind of a foul 4-day weather window. A good buddy of theirs who comes and joins them from the state of Wisconsin decided to make the trip over for the cold weather and the hunt. Now he jumped in the truck at Friday after a shift of work and drove 16 hours straight to the piece of property and made it in there after sleeping in his truck just in time for the afternoon shift. They gathered up at camp, they jumped in the electric buggies, and they moved along the access roads through the property, where Alan then moved up and stopped about 200 yards from the property to get out and slip in quietly. Now in this case, he was hunting this 4-acre field here that was filled with clover, brassica, and ryegrass, trying to catch the deer that were coming out of this deep swamp area, this evergreen swamp that they like to bed in, or just catch deer that were coming out of the clear cut, slipping along the edge of the swamp that might pop up in, see if there's any does in the food plot as they traveled on through the property to other sections of thickets where does could be found. He stopped short of the food plot, rather than walking right up into the edge of the food plot, drifted along the edge of this deep cut and was able to move along down over a bank along the edge of a small swamp and then drift into a shooting house. Now, by taking the long way around on a northwest wind, he's concealing his scent to any deer that might be out in the field, but he's also concealing his footsteps as he moves along, and the sound of his footsteps allows the hunter to slide up in there and with low impact hunt and then slip back out the back door and leave, never putting hunting pressure specifically on the field. So this property had been hunted, or this stand had been hunted that way several times, and as long as the hunter used the long way around, it kept the stand fresh. Now, the stand was fresh, but Alan was dead dog tired as he moved into the tree stand. He showed up, he got set up, and actually within 30 minutes, the Allen buck drifted into the food plot. Now, he was probably laying down right off the edge of this swamp, and he came in for an afternoon feed at about 3:30. He moved across and presented for an 80-yard shot. And we had a good shot. We had a deer that piled up here just off the edge of the field, and because the weather had corrected itself, actually before dark, an even bigger buck showed up in the food plot, moved along, and was scent checking as he cruised through, and weather was the driving factor in this particular hunt. When you're hunting deer, especially hunting deer in areas where they have multiple food sources, sometimes the one thing that will key them in on the food sources more than anything else is severe weather. Severe weather usually takes place when we have temperatures about 10 degrees below the norm, and a couple days of that will push deer to the food source, and that can be all it needs for a hunter and a deer to come together for a successful encounter.